Okay, good evening, everyone. Continuing in Daf Hashavua. On the note of Daf Hashavua is having a campaign right now. I believe a link was posted on Daf Hashavua group. I think Dr. Asi posted a link. If you want to take a moment to take a look at that, we're learning under in their program. They give a lot of good resources, including Machon for the shiurim we do. So you may want to consider being mechazik their program. Okay. We're discussing the sugya that began on Nun Zayin Amud Beis, that a man by the name of Yishmael, a man of the village of the Yam, and some say Ish Kfar Diyama, he had the following shaila, which the way the Ran learned the shaila, an onion that was uprooted in the 7th year and then planted in the 8th year, and the new growth was enough to be mevatel the old growth. And the way the Ran learned the shaila is there's no question the new growth, if it would be a separate entity, would be mevatel the old growth. The question is, do we view it as a separate entity and it's mevatel the onion? Or do we say, no, it's an extension of the old entity? And therefore, just like the old entity is from Shvius, so the new growth is Shvius. That's the shaila. Is the new growth a separate entity, and then in that case, it's mutter, and then it would be mevatel, the original onion? Or do we say that it's an extension of the old entity? And the Gemara just tried to bring a raya from what Rabbi Yitzchak said in Rabbi Yochanan, if you have a certain amount of onions, that you're masaking in it, and then you planted it, and new growth, you have to take meiser off the whole thing. So we see that the new growth is mevatel the old growth, and you have to take meiser off the whole thing. And the Gemara said, no, maybe that's only the chumrah. Maybe that's only the chumrah, that the new growth is mevatel. But ordinarily, if you have stuff that was planted in Shemitah, uprooted, and then planted again in the 8th, maybe then we don't necessarily say bittul. Maybe we say the whole thing is asur. Maybe really it's not a separate entity, it's only a separate entity, l'chumra, not l'kula. Okay? That's what we're holding now. So the Gemara continues now with a sugya that's related to Tehilchas Taruvais. Says the Gemara, Ela min hada, rather from that which we learned. The Tanya, we learned in a braysa, Reb Shimon Omer. Reb Shimon says, Kal davar sheyesh lo matirin, any item that eventually will become mutter. There's a concept of dvarim sheyesh lo matirim, that right now it's asur, but eventually it could become mutter. It could become mutter. Chametz on Pesach is something that after Pesach it's mutter. Dvarim sheyesh lo matirim. Yeah, dvarim sheyesh lo matirim. There's such a concept. Dvarim sheyesh lo matirim. What's the halacha of dvarim sheyesh lo matirim? Afilu be'elef lo batal. Even in 1,000 it's not batal. What's the reason for that? There are two svaras of that. Now, the din that dvarim sheyesh lo matirim is not batal is only min b'minai, not min b'sheinai minai. We had that before. One of the reasons is that in order for something to be batal, it has to be a different entity. It has to be something different than the mixture. But if it's the same as the mixture, it will not become batal. Because if it's the same, instead of becoming nullified, it just gets strengthened if it's the same as what it gets mixed into. So for something to be batal, it has to be different. Usually we say batal by min b'sheinai minai. But even by min b'minai, it's still different. How? Because it's asur and the rest of the mixture is mutter. But if even the isur can become mutter, it's completely similar to what it became mixed into, and then it wouldn't be batal. Okay, so kol davar sheish lo matirin. anything that has a heter, that could have a heter, kugoin tevel, for example, tevel. Tevel is something that has a heter because you could just take off truma. Or umaser sheni. Maser sheni is something that has a heter. How's that? Well, let's say maser sheni gets mixed into other food. You could either redeem whatever maser sheni is in it, or you could bring the whole thing up to Yerushalayim. Vehektish, or hektish. Hektish has a takana. Hektish has a heter. If you redeem it. Vechadash, or a new grain. Chadash has a heter. The carbon omer is materet. Leinasnu behem chachamim shir. The chachamim never gave a shir in how much it becomes batal. You know why? Because it doesn't become batal. Dvarim sheish matirim afilu be'elef lo batal. But v'chal davar she'ein lo matirin, something that has no heter. What's an example of something that has no heter? Kugoin truma. Truma has no heter. What heter does truma have? Once something is truma, there's no way to remove its status as truma. Utrumas meiser, or the truma from meiser. V'chala, or when you're mafresh chala from a dough. V'arla, or fruit of the first 3 years. V'klei hakerem, or something that became aser because it was planted in a vineyard. Nasnu behem chachamim shir. The chachamim did give a shir. Namely, in all of these things, they have a different shir. Truma becomes batal 1 in 100. Or arla 1 in 100, klei hakerem 1 in 200. All of these things the chachamim gave a share because it's dvarim sheish lo matirin. Let's see the Ran. Kol davar sheish lo matirin kugoin tevel shenesarav b'chulin. V'yesh lo matirin, it has a heter. Sheyachal lahafresh mimakom acher, it can be mafresh from somewhere else. U'maiser sheni v'hektish yesh lohem heter b'ptia. Maiser sheni and hektish has a heter in redeeming it. V'chadash sheha'omer matirai. Chadash, that the omer is matirit. Lo nasnu behem chachamim shir sha'oisrim b'chol shehu. They aser even the smallest amount, b'minan, in their min. Miyu shaloi b'minan, but if it's not their min, then b'noisin tam. If shaloi b'minan, then, so again, if it's b'minan, we say that dvarim sheyesh lo matirin is not batal. If it's not the min, so then it is batal, if it no longer gives a taste. The reason is because if it's shaloi b'minan, then it is a different entity than what it got mixed into, so it could become batal. Again, the operating principle is for something to become batal, it has to be different than what it gets mixed into. So, min b'mino, if it's the same species, technically it should be able to be batal, because even though it's the same species, but the fact that it's aser and what it got mixed to is mutter makes it different. But if it's dvarim sheish lo matirin, so even the iser has a heter, so there's no difference at all between it and what it got mixed into, because they're both the same min, and they both are considered heter. But shaloi b'minan, even dvarim sheish lo matirin is mutter b'noisin tam, if it's diffused in amount that it no longer gives a taste. Kivan dahashta asiri, because right now it's aser. Like I wrote before, this is something the Ran explained earlier. Actually, there's another reason given in Masechta Avodah Zarah why tevel is not butter, and that is ke'ateroi kach yisurai. Just like its permissibility is its prohibition. What does that mean? We know that tevel, you could, how do you masakein tevel? You could take off even a mashu of truma. So just like you could be mater tevel by taking off a mashu of truma, likewise tevel asers b'mashu. So it's a little bit of, it's not because it's dvarim sheish lo matirim, it's because just like tevel could become mutter by being mafresh shemashu, so too So too, tevel asers b'mashehu. Okay, the chol davar she'ein loy matirin kagon truma utrumas meiser the chala dafagav the matzi la'ashtuli alayu. Now the Ran has a very interesting point, namely truma has a heter. You know, all these things, truma and meiser and chala, they're all a neder. So if they're a neder, you could be mater neder. If you're mafresh truma, you should be able to be mater neder. Let's say truma got mixed into a mixture. Why can't I be mater neder? No, hataras nedarim is not dvarim sheish matirim. Why? Kima deleka mitzvah lemeved hachi. There's no mitzvah to do so. Lo mikri davar sheish matirim. It's not called dvarim sheish matirim. Since it's a mitzvah, it's not called davar sheish matirim. Kedarminan lekaman. Okay. Now, but anything that is ein lo matirim, the chachamim gave a shir. Sha'afilu nisarvu b'minon, even if it gets mixed in the min, b'telen. Why? Truma utrumas meiser v'chala b'meya, truma utrumas meiser v'chala 100, arla uklei kerem b'masayim arla, and klei kerem in 200. Uv'she'enon minon, but if it's einoi minon, kulan b'shishim, it's always 60. Okay, so now here's where the Gemara kicks in. Shvius, shmita l'chayra is dvarim she'ein loy matiren. And if that's the case, it should be batal b'shishim. It should not aser b'mashehu. And yet, shvius asers b'mashehu, amru lai. The Chachamim said to Reb Shimon, "B'haloi shvius ein loy matirin," but Shemitah has no way to correct it. V'loi nasnu b'Chachamim shir, and yet there's no shir when it becomes batal. Shvius asers b'mashehu, d'tnan hashvius oiseres koshu b'mina. Shemitah asers even b'mashehu. Says the Ran, hashvius oiseres b'koshu b'minan. Two cases. One where Shemitah gets mixed into other fruits. Bein betaruvais peiros heter b'shel shvius. Or bein begidulin. If, let's say, you had an onion that was planted in the 6th year, that you uprooted it, and you planted it again in the 7th year, so the additional gidulin asers the whole thing. And we say that it's aser b'mashehu. That even if you have a little bit of addition to the onion in the 7th year, it's all aser. Now let's think for a moment. That means you have this big onion, it grew mostly in the 6th year, and a little bit grew in the 7th year. And it's aser. Why? Why don't we say that it's not a separate entity? And it grew from the onion of the 6th year, so it should be mutter. Doesn't that mean we consider it a separate entity? If we're going to aser what grew in the 7th year, that means the gidulin are a separate entity. And if they're a separate entity, then according to the Ran, automatically it should be mavatel, right? It should be mavatel the ikar. And yet by Shemitah we say, the shvius, it asers koshehu. In other words, even a little bit asers, that means it's a separate entity. And the whole thing is aser. It's asers b'koshehu, b'mina.
It's a separate entity or the same entity? It has to be the same entity then.
Well, again, if it's considered growing out of the ikar, then it should be mutter, right? If it's according to the Ran, the shaila was, are the gidulin of the 8th year a separate entity and mutter, and then therefore they're mevatel the ikar, or do we say no? They're considered emanating from the iser. Here, the fact that it grew in Shemitah means, and it asers b'koshehu, that means it's a separate entity, and it's not considered emanating from pre-Shemitah. But let's see, the Gemara didn't really spell out the question yet. So that's the question, why is Shemitah is Dvarim she'ein lahem atiren? Amar lahen, Reb Shimon said, let me explain to you Shemitah. You know when I said Shemitah asers b'kol shehu, af ani lo yamarti ela lebior. I only said it regarding the bior. Aval achila b'noisein tam. But by eating, if it gives taste. Let's see what that means. Let's see the Ran. Amar lahem, Reb Shimon said, af heim lo amru ela lebior. You know when I said Shemitah asers b'kol shehu? That you need to eat it before the Zman of the Bior. Because the halacha is before the Bior, it becomes mutter to eat. What does that mean? The halacha is by Shemitah. You know when you're allowed to have the fruit of Shemitah in your house? If that fruit is available in the field for the behemoths. Once it's no longer available in the field, you got to take it out of your house. So the halacha is that before the biur, before the time to take it out of your house, you're allowed to eat Shemitah. So that means Shemitah really is Dvarim sheish lo matirin. So in the time frame before the Isser biur, Shemitah is Dvarim sheish lo matirim, because you're allowed to eat it so long as it's available for the animals in the field. So if you're allowed to eat it so long as it's available for the animals in the field, that's considered Dvarim sheish lo matirim. And therefore what? That's why Shemitah asers b'kol shehu. Aval achila, but to eat it after the Zman biur, look in the Ran. Aval achila means kolomer im nesarvu la'achar biur. The shvius got mixed after the Zman biur. She'im yu oisrim taruvasan. If you're going to answer the mixture, lo sharu be'achila, it's not permitted in eating. Bein b'minan, bein shaloi b'minan, b'noisein tam. Alma gidulin einon nimshachim achar ha'ikr. Okay, after the Zman biur, then there is no heter to eat it. So then the halacha is it's varim she'ein lahem atirim. So then it's not aser b'koshu. It's only aser b'noisein tam. The bottom line is, that means we hold that if you have the onion of the 6th year that also grew in the 7th year, then the 7th year produce, the 7th year addition asers the whole thing. Before the Zman of the biur, it's considered Dvarim she'ein lahem atirim. Even though, what do you mean? Isn't it a continuation of the Iker which began in the 6th year? No, it's the new entity. The 7th year is an entity all by itself. Says the Ran, Alma gidulin einon nimshachim achar ha'ikar. We see that what grows is not drawn after the Iker, liyos kamayo. The ihachi, because if it's drawn after the Iker, heich te'eser shvius begiduleha. Why would the shvius be aser because of its growth? But it came from an onion planted in the 6th year. Levada ein gidulin ke'ikar. We see what the growth is not like the ikar. Hilkach malin. Therefore, it would be mevatel. Says the Ran, this is the source of why I learned the sugya. Again, the Rosh and the Tosfos learn that the shaila is the Iker is for sure aser. No, I'm sorry. The Rosh and Tosfos learn the shaila is on the gidulin. I'm sorry, right? The Rosh and Tosfos learn the gidulin are for sure mutter. The gidulin are for sure mutter. They're for sure a separate entity. The only shaila is, are they mevatel the ikar, or are they not mevatel the ikar? Do we say, well, the ikar is not mixed into it, or it's a davar chashuv, right? The Rosh and Tosfos learned the gidulin are for sure mutter, and the shaila is, do you say bittul or do you not say bittul? The Gidulin are for sure mutter. The shaila is, are they mevatel the ikar or not? But here, we're trying to bring a raya from here. Oh, you see that the Gidulin are aser. Okay, according to the Russian Tosfos, everyone would agree the Gidulin are aser. The shaila is, are they mevatel the ikar, are they not mevatel the ikar? And we're not even discussing here whether they're mevatel the ikar. All we could prove from here is that the Gidulin are an entity by itself. The Russian Tosfos said it's granted the Gidulin are an entity by itself. The shaila is, are they mevatel or not? Well, then what are we proving from here? We're proving they're an entity by itself. That was never up to debate. The Ran was the one who learned the shaila is are the Gedulin an entity by itself? But if they are, they for sure would be mevatel. Says Ran, this is why I learned the sugya this way, because we're bringing a proof to what? All we prove from here is the growth is an entity by itself. But the Russian Tosfos learned that that's granted that the Gidulin are an entity by itself. The shaila is, are they mevatel the ikar? So it must be that the shaila is, are they an entity by itself? Says the Ran, Vare'ata roya desfiralon, we see de'i ein malin, if they're not mevatel, al karcha Gidulin ke'ikar. It's only because the Gidulin are not an entity. Di loy hachi, pashet me Gidulin asrin malin. Otherwise, it's pashat that if the Gidulin are aser, they're mevatel. Elavade kedeprecious la'el. Meaning this proves the shaila is about the Gidulin. The Rosh and Tosfos learn the Gidulin are for sure an entity. The shaila is, are they mevatel? But the fact that the Gemara is trying to prove from here that we see the Gidulin are aser, that means that must have been what was up to debate. Now, here's the $1 million question. What in the world is the Gemara proving? Oh, we see the Gidulin are an entity by itself? But we already said before, maybe that's only l'chumra. Can't bring a proof, right? The shaila is, what if you had Shemitah onion that you replanted in the 8th year? Do we say the Gidulin are an entity by itself, l'kula, and then not only is it mutter, it's mevatel the ikar, but l'chumra we for sure would have said it's an entity by itself. That was never up to debate. That's why in the bottom of Nun Zayin Amud Beis, by Bitzalim, we say that the extra Bitzalim are chayiv in Meiser, and then you have to take off Meiser according to the whole thing, because l'chumra we for sure say it's an entity by itself. So isn't it obvious over here? We would say l'chumra it's an entity by itself. So the Ran says an amazing thing. The Ran says earlier the chumra was one chumra. The chumra was, are the Gidulin an entity by itself? But here there are two chumras. Chumra number one is, why is this shvius growth usher to begin with? Why is it usher to begin with? Why is the Shemitah usher to begin with? Because you're going to say it's a davar sheish al matirin. Why is it davar sheish al matirin? Oh, because it's before the zman biur, so you could still eat it before the zman biur. Is that pashut? That because you're able to eat something before the zman biur, it's considered dvarim sheish al matirin? The Ran says, "V'ner be'ina da'afagav del el detnan dilma lechumra be'ina lemifshata meha desalik adaitin delek lemidchi ki hai gavna." Because there it's only one chumrah. But here, if we're going to say l'chumrah shani, there are two chumras. Number one, that biur, the fact that I could eat it before the biur is like davar sheish matirin. That's a chumrah ba'alma, the Ran says. Okay, so the Gemara, Taka says, no, this is not a raya. V'dilma hanami l'chumrah shani. Maybe this also is an instance where we'll say the Gidulin are an entity by itself, l'chumrah. So now, next case. Ela min hada pashta. We're going to prove it from this case. The Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Bitsalim shiradolem geshamim, onions that rain fell on it, Bitsamchu, and they sprouted. Imhayu alen shalahen shiurim, if their leaves were dark green, blackish green, asuren. Because, we'll see, hayriku, if they were pale, mutaren. Let's see the Ran. Elamin hada pashta, the Tanya b'tsalem sheyard alim geshamim b'shvius. Let's say you had an onion, that rain fell on it in shvius, b'tsamchu, and it sprouted. Im hayu alen shalahen shchayrin asurin. Says the Ran, lav shchayrin mamish, it doesn't mean mamish black. Elanoitin l'shchayras, it's like turning to black. Shazem moichiach, this shows shegidulan yafa, that it grew healthily. And you know how if the leaves are dark green, that means it was nourished from the ground. And the ground is shvius, mikarka shvius nisgadol fikach asurin. So if the leaves are, so you have an onion, the rain fell on it. If the leaves are darkish green, that means it got nourished from the ground, and the ground is shvius. And if you get nourished from the ground of shvius, you're aser. By the way, that means the extra addition of growth came from the Shemitah. And that means we're saying it's aser because the extra growth came from Shemitah. Hayriku mutarin, but if it's pale, it's mutar shkivan she'em yerukim. Since it's like a pale green, lav machmas yinikas hakarka, it didn't get nourished from the ground. Niskadlu, that's not how it grew. Elamachmas habatzal atzma, it grew from the onion itself. There's no isser of something that grows from an onion during Shemitah. So you get this case, it rained during Shemitah, and the onion produced new growth. And if the leaves are dark green, it must have been nourished by the ground, which really means that the extra growth is considered a separate entity. Again, is it this l'chumra? Rabbi Chanina ben Antignoi says, "Imichoylen li talesh ba'alen shalahen asuren." If you're able to uproot by their leaves, that means they're strong and it grew from the ground, then it's asur, even if it's pale. And if you can't pull it out by the leaves, it's mutter, even if it's green. This first case will not prove anything, because this is a chumrah. But then the Brisa says, the Mishnah says, Ukenegda l'matzai shvius. And what if the onion was then, it rained in matzah shvius, and stuff grew out of it, and the leaves are dark green, we say it's mutter. What do you mean it's mutter? But why don't we say it's a continuation from the actual onion? So doesn't that mean it's an entity by itself? Lakula? Mutaran lememra digdule heter malen asar. Are you going? And now once it's mutter, it's logical. It's common sense. It's going to be mavato liyakir. Lememra digdule heter malen asar. Let's see the Ran. Imichoylen li talish ba'alen shalem asuren. The b'chihagav in such a scenario, it's clear that the Yanika is good. Ukenegdan lamatzai shvius mutarin. Mishum de ba'alen halalu, because by these leaves, vaday rabu gidulen al ikar habatza. Certainly, the gidulen were much more on the main onion, hamurav bahem. So, if it rained and new gidulen grew, then they're mutter. And it sounds like the whole thing is mutter, because these leaves, the new growth will definitely be more than the ikar. Kachner ba'alma be'enai alma in gidulen imshachem achar ikar. We see that the growth is not drawn after the main part of the onion. The Adarava Malanoisa, it's Mavatalit. So we see that the Gidulin is a separate entity. Says the Gemara, it's not a raya. You know, maybe we're talking about here crushed onions. Crushed onions are so insignificant that, of course, the Gidulin are an entity by itself and are not nimshach after the crushed onion. But if it would be a whole onion, then maybe we wouldn't say it's mutter. Maybe we would say it's an extension of the original onion. V'dilma b'meduchen, says the Ran, shadok v'shachak habetzalim. You crushed and you ground the onions, v'kimen d'meduchen nenu, since they're crushed. Gari, they're on a low level. V'loy mamshachi gidulin basrayo, and the gidulin will not be drawn after it. Yeah, that is Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph. It's a difficult Amud, but I think we B'siyata Shmaya did it clear. Okay, don't go anywhere. I want to show you something very important. Stay right there. Look what just came from Eretz Yisrael, the new Sefer, Birchas HaTzadik, of the Tzadik Renana. Check this out. It's like almost leather cover. And first pictures of the Tzadik Renana. This is the Rebbe of the Tzadik Renana. This is him as a young man. And a little bit older. And this is him bezeknusai, and this is when he was a Sagi Nahar wearing shades. And Baruch Hashem just came. Okay, have a good night, everyone. Kol Tov, Hatzlacha. Kol Tov.
Quick question. So, if somebody stunted the growth of an onion at the end of the 6th year, and it's not growing, even though it's still inside the soil, it would be permitted? That's not drawing any nutrients?
Yeah. Well, in other words, it doesn't grow, and it's now the 7th year, but it did not grow at all in the 7th year. Then it would be okay. It's only if it actually grew and was nourished from the ground of the 7th year.
You can still place it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Shkoyach. Kol Tov. Good night.